The huge update that will make Aston Martin faster than Red Bull. Aston Martin is collecting the fruits that came as a result of massive updates in every possible field, such as leadership and engineering. But it seems like this is not where they will stop. Although the team is currently in a battle for second place in the Constructors' Championship, they are waiting to bank on an upgrade that would make them even better than Red Bull. Join us as we go through Aston Martin's huge breakthrough and analyze the chances of whether they can make one of the biggest comebacks in the sport's history, after being a laughingstock in Formula One for such a long time. Aston Martin, previously known as Racing Point, is a team that wasn't that popular in the sport. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the engineers that built the car or the drivers that tested it, but the leadership had the wrong approach to the sport. Money can buy you everything. That's what got them into huge problems in 2020 and made them incapable of understanding the 2021 and 2022 regulations and being competitive. Racing Point rebranded to Aston Martin in 2021, and from a team that finished P4 in the Constructors' Championship in 2020, they went into a backmarker team. So seeing them fight for P2 in 2023 is quite the sight that you'd want to see from a team that had a fair share of struggles. This comes down to a couple of things, one being the leadership changing its narrative, and instead of copying, it decided to hire people who had proven success in their respective teams, such as Dan Fallows. Dan didn't come alone, he brought an array of engineers with him. Apart from that, Aston Martin also understood one thing: they must be independent from other teams if they want to be above them. While Aston Martin is using mostly Mercedes parts, such as the suspension, the engine and much more, they are also using their wind tunnel facilities. The one that is brand new and is currently being built in Silverstone is still pending, but Aston Martin is now heavily working towards reaping more advantages from Mercedes wind tunnels thanks to their newest upgrade on their car. It's a bit of a paradox, if I may add, that a team that's using your parts and your facilities eventually does as well or even better than you. However, one thing differs heavily from Aston Martin and Mercedes, and that is the design of the car. The Silverstone-based squad followed the steps that were set by Red Bull back in 2022, which resulted in where they are right now. Even with this, the team is not capable of challenging the Austrian squad, at least not yet. The green Red Bull, as many like to label it, but for now all the right reasons unlike last year in Barcelona, is bringing upgrades to Baku in the form of a new rear wing, and given the fact that the team finished P7 in the Constructors' Championship last year, they have a lot of time to use in the wind tunnel to optimize their performance. Of course, I need not remind you yet again that Red Bull has 10% less wind tunnel time to spend than the second place team, and the sliding scale allows Aston Martin to have an extraordinary advantage compared to not just Red Bull but the rest of the grid as well. Keep in mind that Alonso gave us fair warning after the first race in Bahrain that what we're currently seeing from Aston Martin is definitely not the end, as 2/3 of the AMR 23 will be changing over the course of the season. Tom McCulloch spoke to the media about the advantage that the team has in this particular field, and when asked whether he feels like the team can capitalize on it, he went on to add, "It's definitely an advantage. We try to use it as much as we can. The more time you have, the more sessions you do, and the more things you can analyze. We are every week in the wind tunnel, looking for development avenues that can bring significant performance, keeping the cost ceiling in mind. From Baku onwards, parts will come in. It's really the process that everyone is doing right now." Furthermore, Tom went on to add that his team has been very close with Mercedes and Ferrari ever since testing started, and there are small differences in cornering efficiency. The cars are doing similar times, but they are doing it in different ways, which is something that could benefit Aston Martin in the long term, given the fact that the AMR 23 is a car that's more about cornering than straight line speed. Keep in mind that Verstappen and Alonso weren't the fastest cars when it came to straight-line speed in rear-limited tracks like Bahrain, but they were able to be the most effective and dominant cars on the grid given the fact that they could brake later and accelerate earlier in low and medium-speed corners, which require a huge amount of downforce generation out of your car. So in reality, the AMR 23 is very easy compared to the RB19, with the Austrian team having the better overall performance as of now. But everyone knew that this would happen even before the season began, as Red Bull's early season dominance was not unexpected. What is unexpected though is how close Aston Martin are able to keep with the Red Bull at certain events, and a difference of 6 or 7 tenths may be nothing given the fact that you have so much time to spend in the wind tunnels and eventually make your car even more aerodynamically efficient. That couldn't be said for Mercedes and Ferrari as much as it can be said about Aston Martin, because their boost in these facilities is 10% for Ferrari and 17% for Mercedes, which isn't that much if you want to cut down 5 or 6 tenths of a second per lap. Now, with this in mind, why didn't Aston Martin manage to do better in Melbourne, a track in which they saw Alonso losing the battle to Hamilton and not even being able to challenge him for the P2 fight? For starters, the AMR23 turned out to be a car that's much better on rear-limited tracks, with Melbourne being the opposite of that. Furthermore, Mercedes isn't just going to stand there with their hands in their pockets, as they've also done some setup changes that made the W14 a little more competitive. And according to McCulloch, Aston Martin is yet to find lap time against their rivals in the corners and on the straights, as he went on to praise the RB19's pace, adding, "Their car is very strong on efficiency. The DRS effect is quite strong, but it's also very strong on the straights. Albert Park has a high sensitivity to DRS because there are 4 zones in a relatively short lap. It's a strong car in the corners and very strong on the straights." However, he provided hope for all the Aston Martin fans, and quite frankly speaking, all of the F1 fans, in terms of where he thinks the Red Bull's advantage comes from, as he continued, "It's more likely that the RB19's advantage is fundamentally aerodynamic efficiency. I don't have all the data if you look at the other Honda-powered cars. This effectively means that if Aston Martin is smart enough to utilise the time they have in the wind tunnel facilities, and with the upgrades they are bringing to Baku and Imola, we are going to see a very dominant outing from the Silverstone-based squad. Now that the team has 3 weeks of Easter break, it's going to be very interesting to see where they stand at Baku, given the fact that every team was allowed to work on their car, unlike the winter break. And we must not forget that even the boss, Lawrence Stroll, is expecting that a win from the AMR23 is going to come sooner rather than later. I hate to inform him, but it would likely be Alonso and not his son that would come first through the checkered flag. But from where his team stood in the previous couple of years to where it is right now, I'm sure he'd sign up to Alonso winning a race in 2023 with both hands. As of now, I do believe that Aston Martin is the only threat to Red Bull's dominance, along with Mercedes, but the fact that their wind tunnel time is so big goes on to show that they can work wonders if they know how to utilise it properly. Mercedes is yet to test the new design of the W14, something that has taken them a year and a half to admit, and in this section, Aston Martin is well ahead of the Silver Arrows. Therefore, what do you think about the challenge that Red Bull might receive from Aston Martin? Do you think that the aerodynamic efficiency will improve on the AMR23, which would result in them winning a race sooner rather than later? Let us know in the comments below.